Brendan, hi, how are you?
Hey, good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Good. Thank you for joining.
Yeah,
As always, we had a little bit of a nervous scare right before going live. Or here's the link. Do you have the link? Join us. But here we are. Press
technology.
subverted.
Yep.
So before we start this conversation, my question to you: when you talk about high impact messaging, what is your area of expertise, and are there different things that we should be talking about, whether it's B2B messaging, B2C, or if it's, let's say, me developing my personal brand, talking to everybody, B2B, B2C, just anybody who's willing to listen?
Yeah. So where I work primarily is in technology and B2B. But when you're thinking about messaging in general, to me, the point of messaging is to affect some kind of change, right? People are doing one thing and you want to get them thinking in a different way and doing something in a different way. And so that starts, whether it's B2B, B2C, or anything else, with the people you're communicating with and what they care about. So while the sort of the delivery mechanism, like the tactic or the channel might be different, and the nuance of using that medium might be different, it all starts with who is this for and what do they care about?
And I guess that makes sense because I saw one of the things that I noticed that stood out to me when I was reading your book. One of the pieces of advice that resonated, but then also was wondering how that can be done, is you said when you are creating content for the message to be powerful, talk to one person. Imagine you're talking to one person instead of talking to everybody.
Yeah.
And so, talk a bit about that. Does that mean you have to have such a narrow target defined? What if you want to be talking to very different kinds of people? What do you mean by that when you say talk to one person?
Yeah, that's a great question. So do you need to have a narrow target defined? You don't necessarily. However, my hypothesis is this: if you can't speak to one person and make them care, if the message isn't going to resonate with that one person, it's definitely not going to resonate at scale, right? And this is actually something that not everyone agrees with me with. But so personas is something, if you work in marketing, you know what personas are. And folks will talk about it should be an amalgamation of your target market, right? And the goal is to get this cross section, and that's fine. But if you can't think of your best customer, right, or someone you really want to sell to and think this is going to move them, this is going to get them to stop and lean in, they're going to care about this, then how can you possibly think that at a mass scale that anyone's going to care? And the reality is that many of us have similar desires. So if you can go down to one person and think what would really get that person to lean in, your likelihood of getting other people to lean in on that message goes way up.
Interesting. But so let's dissect that. Who is your target persona?
Yeah, so I work with technology marketers. That's who I'm
Okay.
talking to.
Okay. And then have you defined it? Is that where you stop? Or when you're defining your persona, you go, I don't know, and it's a male in the age bracket of no, 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 no. He has two
Hmm.
kids and the dog he cares about. And on the weekend, he plays soccer.
No, I don't care about all that stuff. What I care about, the details as it intersects with me, and what I provide. So I think you don't need to, if I'm talking about messaging, marketing, something like that to marketers, I don't need to try to create some abstraction of they drive a minivan or have X number of kids, because the reality is the data or the level of specificity is only valuable to the point that you can actually target against it, right? If you really want to get into the weeds on marketing. So you're not going to target most folks on, like you're not going to target a marketer who also drives a minivan or something like that. So I'm just thinking about where do their pains and gains go, and how do they intersect with, my expertise, and where I can offer some believable advice on how to help.
But so are you recommending against those really, because I have within my own business always struggled with this really precise definition of a target and going to into what car they drive and what their hobbies are because I always felt, well, I don't know. And do they really share? Does it matter? So are you just against that narrow definition as a marketer?
Yeah, I think I'm against going beyond. If you're selling B2B, I'm against trying to get down to a level of detail and granularity that, first of all, it's mostly um, guessing, right? You don't really know what kind of car they drive or whatever. And second of all, it's not going to help you improve the specificity or relevancy of your message as it pertains to how you can help them. So sorry if in the background you hear babies crying or dogs barking. We got it's great.
I just heard my son crying out downstairs. So I don't know if it's your dog and my son both combined. I'm trying to mute it. It's not working. So it's going to be a bit of everything. Which brings me to the next point, which I wanted to talk about authenticity. And I suppose this now is a good segue.
There you go. Yeah.
This what happened. What happens right now is authentic. Okay, so another thing that I saw in your book, you talk about the importance of authenticity, and for sure that can be argued, and a lot of people are talking about that. But be yourself is a wonderful message. But here is my twofold question.
Okay.
One, well, first of all, be yourself and be authentic requires a huge amount of self-awareness, right? That's number one, but that's another question. Who are you? And especially I'm talking for if I am creating messaging as an individual, because certainly as an organization, you should know what your DNA is, what you stand for. I'm going to make this question a bit more complex. Okay, so be yourself is a great message, but what if your own self is not the most, not the hugest asset, right? Because you see some people, for example, that, okay, I'm not going to name names, but there's somebody that I follow and I like a lot. I've read his books. They're fantastic. He's incredibly smart, but he's not the nicest person. So his be yourself, when he's just creating messages on social, is off-putting. So be authentic and be yourself. Does that come be 60% authentic and then, kind of polish it up? Or what's your view on that?
So when you're talking about personal brand, and I'm not sure that I'm really an expert on that, to be perfectly honest with you, but my point of view in general with messaging is that, and this is almost not to the authenticity, but to another law in the book, which is the law of the edges, which is the biggest risk that any of us run right now is not alienating an audience, it's being ignored altogether. And you're better off having half people love you and half the people hate you than nobody know who you are, right? And that goes as an individual or as a brand. And so here's the interesting part about that is you still follow that individual, right? And we're talking about him right now. I was just in a conversation with a client of mine a few weeks ago about Dave Gearhart, who's got a big presence on social media, who was the former CMO at Drift. He went somewhere else now, Privy, I think maybe. She was saying that she found his messaging off-putting, exactly what you're saying. But we were talking about him, and I bet you he's not talking about her. So right, he's winning it, right? And I think people relate to people, and you want to find your group, right? And that goes as a brand too. You're not going to move 100% of your market, right? You want to find your group that really leans in on who you are, what you stand for, what you believe in, and then where you can put that forward. And especially in times like right now, where everyone is saying the same thing in these uncertain times, right? By leaning in on what you really think, you're going to find the people who agree, and they're going to have a real emotional connection with you instead of a surface level thing.
Interesting. And talking about, the uncertain times, because I saw that one of your posts, short post, and it said, let's not all be saying or starting every marketing message or just every message in these uncertain times, which I have to say I've been doing a lot of, because if I'm looking at my LinkedIn lives, I'm wondering about ours, but if I'm looking at my LinkedIn lives, it's all how to na-na-na in crisis times, how to da-da-da in uncertain times. So are you saying, what are you saying about that? Why is that a bad thing to do? Because, it then makes it context appropriate and less tone deaf, I find.
Well, I'll tell you why I say that. I use this analogy a lot, which is the fan and the explosion, right? If you turn a fan on in your room, in a couple minutes, you're not going to hear the sound anymore, right? But if an explosion goes off outside your window, you're going to have to turn and look. And when everybody says the same thing, it's alarm fatigue. After a while, you don't hear it anymore. And so when you see in these uncertain times, there was a study done by SalesLoft that showed that any sales message that included the word COVID-19 in it, and I'll screw up the exact percentage, but it was it saw a 50% reduction in responses versus those that didn't mention it. And so people quickly tire of hearing the same thing. And so when you say, it's not that you shouldn't message to what the world is, but you have to find words and a POV that is yours. Otherwise, when they look at their feed, why are they going to stop on your message, which is the 19th message in a row that just said in these uncertain times, right? So it almost becomes more tone deaf because it's the exact same. And that's not picking on you or anyone else. It is the easiest thing to say, right? And we're all trying to move quickly. But that's why I say that you have to go a layer deeper, because otherwise you just get lost in the noise of everyone saying the same thing.
But so, and by the way, pick on me, because that's the best way to learn, is to be told what you're doing wrong, not what you're doing right. So very comfortable with that. But so then my question to you, so during those uncertain times, as far as your own messaging, and then the messaging you've been creating for your clients, which I hope you're still having clients in those uncertain times. So what do you recommend? I mean, where's that balance? Because you don't want to also keep posting as though nothing is happening when stuff is happening. And then, I mean, you are tone deaf. However, I understand what you mean. Then when it's overdone, and also it's overdone and it's not good news that what's happening, right? So also become immune to constantly seeing it and hearing about it. But so what are some of the tricks, wording, messaging, where you communicate your point of view on something without it being too out of context?
Yeah, so a simple way to address that is, instead of talking about the uncertainty for all of us, you talk about the result that uncertainty creates for that specific group, right? So if you're talking to marketers, you might talk about, how to adjust how are other leaders adjusting their go-to-market strategy for now, right? Like, how do you take the uncertainty and figure out what the question is that the uncertainty is creating, and then you message to that, instead of just leading with the uncertainty, which is what ends up getting lost. Because now, instead of going vague and general, you go to the specific. And by being more specific, you get more people to lean in. And you also get more people who are actively looking for help in hopefully whatever the area is that you help them with, right? Wherever your believability is, that intersection.
Could you give me any examples of brands or people whose messaging you've seen in the last couple of weeks and thought that it was well done?
Yeah, actually, I just saw a post by Wes Bush, who's at, screw it up, Next View Ventures, maybe, I think. And they're doing a whole series of content around, so, they're the ones who founded Product-Led Growth, and they do B2B SaaS startups. And they're creating a lot of frameworks and ways of thinking about things. So instead of leading with, for example, in these uncertain times, how should you, think about leading your software organization? What they're doing is providing direction, right? Oh, sorry. Hold on 1 second.
The authenticity of the times.
Sorry, guys. What they're doing is providing direction, and by being more specific in the kind of value they can provide, they're getting a lot of traction. And it's also really clear and specific who it's for, right? It's for software founders. It's not just generic messaging. I think one of the things that people are doing wrong, right, is you have people that have nothing to do with the COVID crisis. Like, I don't know, you sell sunglasses or something, and they're talking about, I don't know, how they're keeping their offices clean. And it's like, that's not what your customers are concerned about.
Right. There's also have been certainly, and there are a lot of memes and jokes going around that we all of a sudden know all of the mailing lists, email lists that we're on, because literally every single company that I didn't even remember existed sent the message saying that they're taking the crisis very seriously, right?
Yeah.
So actually, talking about that, email marketing, I'm really happy that this just came out. You are saying in your summary bio on your profile that email marketing is where it's at, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was under the impression that, especially with social and the ease of connecting with consumers on social and email marketing being overdone, that the ROI is kind of starting to go down and it's not as effective. You're saying the opposite. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so again, where I focus is technology. And when you're talking about communicating with any sort of an executive audience, any sort of a buying committee, email is the place that every single person checks on a daily basis, multiple times a day. And so if you can get good at that channel, it is your most direct line of communication to those people. Some people check LinkedIn, some people check social media. You're subject to the vagaries of those algorithms and your ability to connect with them. If you can get it good at email, it's the most effective way to deliver content to those people. Social is also good, but it's a different role in that kind of complex buying funnel. In that I see it, it's an awareness play, and it's a proving ground, right, about what kind of messaging is going to work. You can't start. I get from a social selling context, I guess you can start conversations, but from a one-to-many context, email is going to be the most effective way to do that at scale.
Interesting. And before we get into the messaging of emails, because I would imagine that is the most important part, do you have any numbers or best practices of, I don't know, an email list should be a minimum of X in number of contacts, or you need to be sending out emails once a week, 3 times a week, I don't know, once a month is so far and few in between that nobody remembers. Are there any kind of standard-ish suggestions there?
Yeah, that's difficult to templatize. I think, in terms of the list, it's really going to depend on the size of your total available market and what you're looking at. I think, and frequency is one of those things too that I would be thinking about. Again, so I come again from the lens of the technology marketing place, where I would be thinking about what triggers do I need to have in place when people visit my website or when they take different kinds of actions. Have I thought about making sure that as people navigate through content, as they navigate through the different stages of the journey, do I have the right messages in place so that they're getting timely, if they look at the pricing page on technology, are they getting an email about pricing? Are they getting a nurture stream that speaks to that? If they look at a certain solution, if they look at a certain piece of content, right, and working to improve my use of automation to make sure that people are getting the right messages at the right time.
And you don't feel, so you obviously leverage automation and you do drip campaigns and you automate messaging for clients, yes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you feel that it's starting, that's a horrible sentence. Do you feel that it's starting to feel, but that consumers start feeling that it's too impersonal, the whole automation thing, or you're not seeing it yet?
It's about the approach. It is about the approach. Like most things, right? You can use the tactic well, or you can and not use it well. And I think email is one of those mediums that can be misunderstood too, and that people they try to drive they just try to sell, again and again and again, and it's they don't use the medium properly to educate, right, and to nurture. And that's so I think you absolutely can overdo the automation, but if it's done well, it feels timely, and it feels appropriate, and it's providing extra value and context to whatever action the person just took.
Okay. Does the subject line matter?
Of course.
Do you have, okay, so what we've been doing with Pronexia, with our emails, I think all of them at this point are automated emails where we send to a group of people. We always include the person's first name in the subject line, but we do it every single time. Do you do that? Is it overdone to you at this point? Or, I don't know, give me some tips, like a subject line that you've used that generated results, like a lot of clicks. Are there words to use? You actually in your book also talk about words not to use and words to avoid because they're too generalized or cliche. Give some specific examples.
So 1 or 3 word subject lines are by far, and this is over a large swath of emails, going to drive the largest open rates. The first name stuff.
1 to 3?
Yep. 1 or 3, actually. It's 1 or 3. And
I'm just like one word?
Mm-hmm.
What? Okay.
And so the why I don't know, but my suspicion is that it's because when you send an email to anyone you work with or someone you know, you don't have a 9-word subject line, right? And so it becomes really clear when you get long subject lines. And there's a link in my featured section of my bio that's an email training that people can look at if they're interested in this topic. But people, when you get to, I was talking to an executive at Expedia a few weeks ago, she gets 500 emails a day. So you think about what that means, right? In terms of your ability to sort through an inbox. You're going to automatically sort, this is marketing, this isn't, and you're going to pay attention only to the things you think aren't marketing. So as soon as you start to go to the long subject lines, people can automatically dump that message into, this is marketing, I don't need to look at this right now. And so 1 to 3 word subject lines look like the kind of messages you actually send to people you know, and so they get more opens.
Very interesting. What's an example? Give me an example of a 1 word subject
Of
line.
1 word?
Yeah.
I mean, so I mean, it's super context dependent, right? And it's when you think about how to use email, every element is just to drive the next step. So the subject line is just going to get somebody to stop and click in, right? The first line is just to get them to read the second, etc. So how you position it, but I'm trying to think of something we've sent recently. I think we did looking ? Recently, and that did well. That was, and it was for a solution page trigger email, something like that. I think, but it really there's no 1 word, right? I mean, that words like free, capitalized free, are going to put you in spam buckets, things like that. But there's no 1 word. I think it's really offer and context dependent. How do you get people to lean in, right?
Right, of course. I was just curious of what that 1 word could even be, because I don't think I've ever received an email that had only 1 word, unless it was from a friend or a contact. You're absolutely right. Yeah. But not a marketing email. So that's really interesting. We're going to give it a go. It sounds really cool. And then another thing you said in your book, as far as the words to choose or words to avoid, and you said high impact messaging always avoids words such as easy, simple, or solution.
Yeah. The reason that people lean on generalities, right, when they get into complex concepts, so they'll end up saying we have an XYZ solution, right, or we make this easier. But what moves people is seeing a better version of themselves in the solution, right, understanding how it's going to transform them from A to B, right, a better version of themselves, self-actualize. And if you say something like RFPIO is an example I use, who, the company is killing it regardless of this, but we make responding to RFPs easy, something like that, right? I don't know what that means in context. Whereas if you can get specific, right, about the change that it makes, now I can picture the benefit of that solution, and you're going to get more people to lean in.
Interesting. One of the examples you give in the book, saying you would never go to the grocery store seeking a hunger solution.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, that's exactly it. But when concepts get complicated, we default to what's, and the sentiment is not wrong of solution. It's just that it takes more work to get to the specific words, and that's why it often gets left in a general place.
It's interesting. And it's as I'm talking to you, it's interesting how many nuances there are, right? How many different things, the subject line, 1 word, how many words to use, words to avoid, the cadence, the, kind of mindset when you're writing, creating that messaging. Here's my other question on that topic. I own a recruitment firm. Okay. And pretty much most business owners or hiring managers think that they can do what I'm doing with their eyes closed. And so they'll only hire me if they want to save some time or something. Mm-hmm. But everybody feels that it's easy and they can do it. I'm seeing a little bit of that tendency with marketing as well, specifically on the communication side, not on the email marketing or anything that's more technical, because that requires more knowledge. But all of a sudden, again, because of social media, almost everybody feels that they can craft their own message, right? Sure. And you'll often see, the Gary V's of this world will put out content. I'm talking about written content with spelling mistakes, with no syntax, just one really long sentence that has all sorts of confusion, and it works for them. How does it make you feel as a marketing and content expert?
Well, so I'm not like a rules person. I'm not a big grammar person. I think what works is what works. And I think, so something that you do in direct response copywriting a lot, right, is instead of spelling to, you'll put the word I guess technically the right thing is, no, you're supposed to spell two, right? You see, I'm not big on grammar. Like, you're supposed to spell two out, but you put the number two, and you're going to see, for subject lines as an example, more clicks. And so, to me, again, coming back to the authenticity, how do you communicate in a way that's going to be effective for the people you're trying to communicate with? It doesn't, I think spelling errors and all that stuff doesn't hurt my feelings. Like, it's about the message is more than a set of rules. And I think in terms of, people should craft their own messaging if they can, and if they feel confident that they can create something compelling, right? The hardest part is if you don't have, so on a personal level, if you don't have that level of self-awareness to know what you want to say, and on a corporate level, it's how do you speak in a way that's going to move a whole market, and that you can speak on behalf of thousands or tens of thousands of people, right?
So when you create then communication or messaging, let's say messaging for, I don't know, let's say your client brother, as you're writing it, you're literally envisioning a person and you're talking to that person. Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, on our briefs, we'll put, like Cvent is an example of this. The gal's name is Shonda. There's a picture of Shonda on our briefs, and above it says, what would Shonda think? And it's like, do we really think Shonda would lean in on this, or would she not? And she's a real person, she's a customer, and it's a rubric, and it gets you thinking about, would they care about this? And I think offer titles, assets, right? When you talk about content, again, in the tech world, like, you're going to create content, ebooks or interactive, whatever it is. When you're titling it, is this something that she's going to care about? So yeah, there's a real person at the heart of that stuff.
And so let's say, and you said your focus is not personal branding, it's B2B and specifically tech. But within the organizations you work for, I'm sure that there are executives who are also outspoken and do have their own personal brands or spoken on social media. Yeah. Do you ever look at their messaging to make sure that there's alignment with the corporate messaging, corporate marketing messaging that you're creating? Does it not matter? Can they do damage? Do you look at it in that kind of full spectrum, or can those executives have their own completely fully defined personal brands and messaging that's here, and then the corporate marketing messaging, I'm not in here, one year?
So the executive brand is always going to have some reflection on the corporate brand, right? Because if they're outspoken, it will be. So Gary Vee is somebody you talk about, right? Like, his persona is going to bleed onto the agency, whether or not, I think it's most effective when you have really passionate executives in place at these companies. And it's most effective when you can get a story in place, a narrative. And by narrative, I mean, what's the change that's happened, right? What's the promise you're making? What's the villain you're fighting against? How are you making this change, right? There's a structure to this. If you can define that as a company, and it's owned all the way from the top down, and the marketing is an amplification of that story, and the executive is also talking about, Drift is a great example of this. Their story of conversational marketing, right? It comes all the way from David Cancel. You can see it in his tweets. Product-led differentiation is going away, things of this nature. So I think when you have executives who are passionate about the story, it's a benefit. It's not a damaging thing.
Interesting. But then, so for somebody who is in, the services business, let's take yourself. You are a marketer, and you create quite a bit of messages, quite a few posts, and you share quite a bit on LinkedIn. I don't know how active you are on other platforms as well, but let's take LinkedIn. But you also, obviously, as a marketer, need to be able to adjust your voice, tone, etc., persona when you're crafting messages for your clients, right? It needs to reflect them, not you. So do you feel, and I'm like so projecting all over the place, I can tell you why after, but do you feel the need to self-censor at all on the and I mean, I don't know your personality, but
Sure.
do you feel that you try to make your posts and messages kind of like in between, not too black, not too white, not too potentially antagonizing, because you don't want the clients to feel, whoa, he's really, I don't know, crass and outspoken, and their brand is very mild, or he is very mild and the brand is more aggressive. So what is your strategy for your own messaging, your Brendan's messaging?
Sure. So I try to follow my own, drink my own Kool-Aid, so to speak, and be authentic to what I think. And I don't think that much about offending anyone. Not that I say anything that divisive. But for me, again, I really am happy for some people to not agree with my points of view, because I'd rather, the world is large, right? And for all of us, we're not trying to get 100% of a market. We're trying to find those people with whom we can create connections. And so I would rather say what I really think and find those people who agree than worry about trying to go to the middle and be another person talking about you need to add value with your content, right? Which is like every content marketing person in the whole universe saying that. And you're just lost in the crowd.
It's funny you say that, because that is one of the areas where I struggle. This whole, you need to be adding value. You need to be adding value. You're saying it's too many posts about COVID, and no, they're drowning in the number of posts of you need to be bringing value, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering, like, am I bringing value, right? I usually will write, post, share with no strategic goal in mind other than I'm sharing my authentic self. I hope some people sometimes will get inspired. Some people it will prompt their thinking on the topic. And yes, sometimes it does bring value, right? Conversations like these certainly bring value.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting you say that. Like, what brings value? What does that mean? That phrase, bring value.
For me, something's either educational or entertaining, right? And education can be entertaining, but that's what bringing value is.
And so for you, because when I was scrolling down your feed and stalking you on LinkedIn to get to know you better, certainly your posts, you share a lot of quotes, you share a lot of thoughts on marketing, a lot of takeaways. So yes, your messaging is definitely, value giving driven. But I haven't seen many posts, and maybe I didn't scroll down enough. You'll tell me, that tell people about you, your background. Why are you in marketing? Who are you? What do you care about? What pissed you off in the morning? What made you really happy on the weekend? Is it strategic that you don't share that? Is it just not in line with your personality to do that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So for me personally, it's about, over a period of time, how are you going to create some level of memorability around an expertise, right? Because there's a lot of people that say a lot of different things. And I try to go and lean into the areas where I think I have some unique point of view, right? And so what I get purview into that isn't traditional is how all these different companies are doing messaging, what's working, what's not, what's working in marketing right now. My morning routines or those sorts of things are not particularly unique and mostly borrowed from other people, right? I mean, I do what a lot of people do, right? I like meditate, I drink, whatever, but I don't feel like I have some unique insight there. So it's not something that I just talk a lot about in those channels, and I gravitate towards publishing the kinds of things that I consume. That's the other thing. I think one of the things we can all do at a corporate level too is what actually gets me to lean into something as a human being in my own personal life, and then how can we twist that for a business.
Interesting. I'm noticing with myself and my own content that I'm very active on LinkedIn. I'm noticing that the posts that people seem to really care about much more are not the ones where I have a lot of experience in recruitment and hiring. I know a lot of behind the scenes. I will share it candidly and like, man. And then I will write, yesterday I wrote about growing up in the Soviet Union and kind of having a bit of a feeling of living in a totalitarian regime right now with the
Yeah.
50s going on. That ruffled feathers, as you would imagine. And that resonated, right? That brought out emotion and resonated. But is that bringing any value to my business? Not really. Is that too personal? Like, if you were my marketer, what would you tell me?
I think that stuff is great. And that is, I mean, I think everyone has a unique story. And there's absolutely, you know, you are a unique person and you should put that stuff out there. I think it does depend. Likes are not dollars, right? And so you have to think about what you're doing it for and what you're in it for, you know. And I do think, again, people connect with people. So telling your whole story can be good. I saw one of my friends owns a marketing agency. Like the most likes he got on anything that I've seen is like it was just a picture of a rainbow that happened recently and like near here. And it was like a bright thing. Does that help to communicate anything? You know, a POV on business? No, but it, you know, it got engagement. But it you know, you have to determine what you're on LinkedIn for, right? And what is that for?
Very interesting. And then, well, then you know what? I am on LinkedIn because I do like the personal side of things too. And I'm not a Facebook person, so I just don't like Facebook. Maybe I would have found more of that realization there. But so, what is your background aside from what's on your LinkedIn profile? Like, at what age did you develop an affinity for words and messaging and expressing yourself? When did that happen?
Yeah, that happened. I mean, I've always been a big reader and all that kind of thing. And the marketing, I started in this whole business because I thought I wanted to write for outdoor magazines. And then there was I quickly realized that there was no real money in that. And unfortunately, and so I was actually working in real estate and I put together what they wanted me to do was go cold calling, go knock on doors. It was for an office. It was office leasing in LA. They wanted me to go cold calling and I was knocking on doors. And what I quickly realized was that nobody wants to talk to you when you walk into their office building, you know, unannounced. Surprise, surprise. And so I put together these direct mail pieces that I like read some books on copywriting, put together some direct mail pieces, and I got like $50 million in deals for this team out of these direct mail pieces that I put together. So this was like the light bulb moment of, whoa, like this actually, there's something here. And that was 15 years ago or something now. And so I took that story and I started shopping it around and I grew from there. And over time, I started to realize, you know, things people were doing wrong. They didn't have top-down strategy. They didn't have, you know, these different pieces. And I've evolved since then.
Interesting. But you seem to have evolved in so apart from the, communication and your love for word piece, you seem to evolve in a very different direction because, writing for, outdoor lifestyle magazine, that's B2B, that's outdoor, and you're in B2C, and you're in B2B tech.
Yeah. Yeah. There's just, you know, I like that side of things because it's a very interesting thing trying to get a group of people to do something. And a lot of times when you're selling technology, you're trying to influence a group of people to make a certain kind of decision. And so I like thinking about the complexity of that and also how to take something that is inanimate and give it some emotional quality that people are going to, you know, really care about and make it compelling enough that they're going to spend hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, you know, or whatever the particular ACV is for that company, and, you know, be willing to really care about it.
But so you're saying that it's possible to write strong and compelling copy without it necessarily being for the field you are most passionate about.
Of course, I think the human element is what unites all this, and I think that's what, you know, with messaging in general, it's for somebody. So I think, you know, you're thinking about how it's the process that you can become passionate about, right? It's not necessarily the technology itself, but it's how do you make people care about this thing, and then what does it do for your clients? Like for your clients, they get recognition, you know, like they get, you know, a lot of positive things happen in their life when these campaigns go take off, and so that brings me a lot of satisfaction when it happens.
Mm-hmm. And in these uncertain times, now I'm going to be saying all the time just because, but in these uncertain times, because you're a freelancer, right? You're a consultant.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Have you seen, has it affected your consulting practice?
Sure. Yeah. Two Expedia and Cvent were two large clients, and both of them, it's event technology and travel. So they understandably are figuring out what this all means, right? Or not what this all means. I don't want to speak on their behalf, but they're adjusting to what's happening, and so that part has. But thankfully, there's still a lot of questions out there, and certain sectors are still doing well. So it's definitely affected it. But for me, it's also the last 5 years have been this sort of breakneck pace. So on a personal level, it's given me an opportunity to think a little bit and put some pieces into place that there's been no bandwidth to do. And, we have a 10-week-old here, so spend some time with, my son. So, in those ways, it's also been a positive thing, as much as anything like this can be positive.
But so have you gone down the route of what many consultants are doing right now, of offering free webinars, free consultation sessions to kind of build up that pipeline for when things pick up, or what has been your angle there?
Yeah, I'm investing a lot, but I don't do any free consulting. Primarily, I don't think people value free advice, and I don't do that. But what I have been doing is doubling down on things like starting a podcast to start to build relationships, right? Learn from folks like that. Doubling down on, I have a huge backlog of content from doing conferences, from putting presentations together, from the book, from all these things that has not gotten promoted effectively because of bandwidth issues. So I'm taking all that and bringing it to market in a stronger way. And I don't, none of us knows what's going to happen with all this. So, we'll see how long it lasts, I guess, and how severe the impact is.
Let's not talk about that right now. About those uncertain times. Comment from somebody, from our viewer right now. She says, also I find that I cannot predict which of my posts will attract a lot of attention, but it's never the ones I think will be popular. I do notice that the least rehearsed and deliberate posts are the most popular. And I agree with that. It's whenever I find that I cannot fake emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I write with emotion and spur of a moment, it can be something business related or personal either. That clicks and resonates with people the most. And I guess it feels more authentic, likely you will say, and that's why. But how can that be reproduced in a more deliberate fashion? So let's say if I want to write a series of posts, right? So that I'm not constantly creating content in the moment. I find that whenever I've done that, those have fallen kind of flat. So what are your tips there? Like, do you go into like a specific zone, emotion, or like there just go to words? What are the tricks?
So there's different things here, right? When you're talking about engagement and impact, it's not necessarily the same. And I was in a client meeting the other day, and somebody regurgitated a post back to me, and it was a whole team of people, right? And they regurgitated something back to me that I'd said on LinkedIn. That particular post did not do well, right? But this whole team was talking about the insight from that thing, and none of them, by the way, had liked that post. But so you don't necessarily, and I think that's what's tricky with social media, is you can get wrapped up in the dopamine hit of the likes, but you don't necessarily see the impact you're having. And if you think about it from a month, like if you are trying to build some brand awareness around business, it's going to take time and reps for people to start to associate you with whatever the thing is, recruiting. And it doesn't mean they necessarily like you every time, but it means when that thing comes up that they might need help with, and then you're in the feed, you get a nod to have the conversation. And in terms of how to get in the zone, I ascribe to the whole cornerstone content idea, which is I think what you do is create long form pieces that are well thought out, and then you take that thing that you've thought out and you break it up into 1,000 different things and use that over a period of time, because you're going to have to hit somebody 8, 10, 12, 15, 20 times to get them to start remembering or even knowing what you're talking about. So the reps of getting it out there is going to be, and then you have something that's unique and really your POV versus just like, my Cheerios were really good this morning.
Right. Those I haven't shared yet.
Yeah.
It's interesting what you're saying, because it's another thing that I haven't done at all. And when we were speaking before going live, and I told you I would send you the link to this video, you said great, because I'm going to chop it up and use it for a whole bunch of pieces of content.
Yep.
And just when you said that, I was like, have not done that at all, but that makes sense. And then what would you do? Like, let's say you take this video, it's going to be an hour,
Yep.
and then you'll do little audio snippets, or you'll just listen to yourself and you'll say, it was very smart what I said there. So I'll just do like a written piece, or like video, audio. Like, what are you going to do with that? Because I'm going to do something similar once you tell me.
I would look at themes, and I would think about what are the people that I'm talking with care about, and then I would either, maybe I'd pose the question in an intro card, right? Like, how are people going to market now? And you cut that out, and then you link them to the video. And this is what I'm doing with the podcast too. Is, I really, with the podcast, I want to make the people that I'm interviewing the hero of the conversation, not myself, right? So I'm thinking about what are the themes. And it's exactly the strategy that you're doing right here, right? And how do I then take and find their wisdom and pull it out and make a bunch of little snippets and then drive back to the main asset? And again, it's a bunch of little taps over time that are going to get people to start thinking differently and associating you differently and all those things. So that's what I'll do with this, is just think about what are the themes, what are the questions that the people I'm speaking with might have, and how do I then create little sections that might answer those questions.
Right. And you can honestly say, okay, but be honest. So when you are sharing and posting and doing all that, you create all those snippets and be posting, you don't really look at the likes and comments?
Of course I look at them, but I try. So what people engage with is some measurement of what they care about. But I think, like I said, the rainbow, the half-life of social media is really short, specifically, and the half-life of our memory is even shorter. So I try to think about the theme and the overarching message. What is it I want to communicate? For example, like, one of my core tenets is, if people are going this way, you have to go this way, right? Like, you need to do things differently. And so I try to think about, how do I kind of impart these ideas of what I see effective, which is the brands that are willing to zig when other people zag, right? And I focus on doing that, because I think that what's interesting about the likes and comments is this just happened. I posted the exact same thing. Okay, literally, I didn't change a word 3 different times, and I don't remember exactly what the times were, but one time it got like 5 likes, one time it got like 50 likes, and one time it got like 230 likes. The exact same thing, and it was within the span of a week. So what that tells you is that most people don't see most of what you put out there, right? And so you're subject to all the vagaries of, the platform at that time, and who happens to comment early or see it early, and all these different factors that you can't game for. So you have to figure out, what's the core themes I want to communicate for people, what's the value I want to add, and then how do I do that consistently so they start to associate you with it. That's my hypothesis.
Well, I like it. I mean, but I have to say, if I'm being very honest, the vanity metrics still play a role every now and then.
Sure.
I look at them. And so to anybody watching right now, please do click like or love or the clap thing and leave a comment, because it does, like, that dopamine hit, it's real and it's there. And I have so many people, Brendan, that will say, like, I messaged somebody this morning that came up on my feed. He registered for one of my LinkedIn Lives, and I hadn't spoken with him since 2015. So I was like, oh my God, dude, I sent him a private message. Said, oh my God, do you still remember me? This is like amazing. And I thought you were still at that company and you've changed companies and this is crazy. And he writes me back and he's like, yeah, all those great things you're doing and this and that. And I'm like, I don't remember any likes or comments on any of my posts. Where are you on them, right? I don't know why some people will just not engage and will
Well,
just
it's something like 3% of LinkedIn, I think, that actively posts. I think it's 3% of the membership base that actively posts. So that's most social media. My wife's boss was just saying to me that he said, that, oh, I saw you said this the other day. He's never said anything on anything I've ever posted. And it's not that I don't think the engagement is a useful metric to understand what resonates. I just think you have to be careful about reading too much into it, because there's so many factors that play into why it does or doesn't get the reach, not the least of which is, did a person with a high rating themselves happen to see the post early enough and then comment on it early enough, right? And then there's all these reasons why you may get more views and more play, and it may or may not be the strength of the individual message.
And when you mentioned that same post that you shared received different types of engagement, and you said it was during the same week, more or less, but at different times, specifically for email, what are the best practices to send? And let's say it's B2B, because again, you're going to tell me it depends. I'm like, what and who? But let's say it's B2B.
Yeah.
Are there days that are no, days that are better, time of day? Like some people I've seen say when it's like 5 minutes to lunch, it's good because people are like winding down but haven't gone for lunch yet. Do you believe in the ideal timing?
So I believe in testing, and I believe in figuring out what works for you. And I think depending on who you're sending to, you're going to get data back on what are the best times for them. And I also believe in relevancy, meaning, so if you're talking about like a newsletter, I think you should test and see where you get the most engagement. You can look at stats in aggregate, and there's plenty of them out there that will say Tuesday at 10:30 in the morning is one that I see frequently as the highest engagement, and that's EST. And but you'll find that in aggregate doesn't matter when you're speaking to your list. So you have to figure out what those people want and when. And the best time to send an email is when somebody has done something to trigger that email, right? So that's another thing to think about.
Yeah, we don't do that at all, but that's for another conversation. Does consistency matter? And consistency, I mean, they're different, the consistency of why, but specifically, let's say I've been doing my LinkedIn Lives every single day, and it's for now. It's not always going to be every single day. But then even for the time being, is it important, do you feel, to stick to just one specific time of day and like always figure out what time is better and just have that predictability and always go at the same time?
If you're talking about a newsletter and you're creating something that is of value, I think there's value in creating something that people can look forward to. Mm-hmm. So I do think there's value in giving that consistency. Tim Ferriss, somebody pops in my head, which is not a B2B example, right? Who sends his 5-bullet Friday every Friday, and it's something that people, he gets huge engagement on that for a variety of reasons. So I do think there's value in creating something that people can look forward to and anticipate.
Okay, so then probably that would apply to something like this as well, where there's consistency. And because at this point, people do ask me, your next LinkedIn Live, what time is it at? How do I find it? Because there's that lack of predictability.
No question. And reps in anything, right? Especially when you're talking about something like this, you're going to build folks are going to show up the first time not knowing what to expect. And then you're going to do a great job interviewing, and they're going to get excited to hear more of them. And so giving them that consistency and knowing what to expect. And then making it available to them beyond that, if you're talking about something like this, like cutting it up, it's going to be a lot for you, because people are going to do things on demand now, right? That's how we expect everything.
Yeah, and I've noticed also a lot of people will go and watch those recordings after, and not necessarily during the time, but at least creating that consistency in their minds. We're at the top of the hour. So what I want to know, my last question, Brendan, if, somebody watched right now, realized you're awesome and you're great at what you do, how do people get in touch with you, and what would be your services? So you mentioned B2B tech is your core area of expertise. So if anybody's looking for marketing and communications help with that. But you also mentioned, I think you have a course in email marketing. So how can people get more of you is the question.
Get more of me. So if you just want to follow, LinkedIn is the best place. That's the platform where I'm active. Website is brendandell.com. And what we do is create unignorable tech companies. So if anybody out there is a tech company that wants to be unignorable, happy to chat.
That's a really good tagline. You came up with that?
Yeah. It's like we do this all the time.
I should do something like that for, these interview series that I'm creating. But like, I will make you unignorable.
Yeah, there you go.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time and your expertise, Brendan. Your book is awesome. It's super catchy. I've been taking a lot of notes and copy pasting things as I'm reading. Where's the camera here? So thank you very much for that. And I recommend, the name of the book is in the event page. So anybody who's watching right now and would love to grab a copy, it's there. Thank you for your time, your insight. Good luck with the baby. 10 months old is not an easy time. And we'll be speaking again soon. Thank you again.
All right. Thanks.